Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so I'd like to get started. I'm sure we'll have some other people rolling in. We had a lot registered for tonight. Good evening, I'm Steve Kennedy, and I'd like to welcome everyone to part two of our technology roundtable presented by the Mid-Atlantic Federation of Postal History Societies. We're an organization dedicated to postal history education and collaboration. Please check our website at mafphs.org for more information. This roundtable, along with others we present, will be recorded and available on the presentations tab on the website after we're done. So I'd like to introduce our panelists tonight, starting with Scott English. Scott's the Executive Director of the American Philatelic Society. He has extensive management experience combined with hands-on knowledge of the technology that enhances our philatelic experiences. Please support the APS and the APRL by visiting when you can. We really appreciate the help and support that we receive from everyone that works there. Dr. Charles DiComo, lifelong philatelist, postal historian, and award-winning author. He is president of the Philatelic Society of Lancaster County, the Empire State Postal History Society, and editor-in-chief of the USPCS Chairman's Chatter, a life member of the Classic Society, and on the board of the Pennsylvania Postal History Society, and I'm sure a lot more. Native New Yorker, he resides in Lancaster, PA, with his wife Kathleen and their two daughters, McKenna and Mia. In the 2018 American Philatelic Society website award competition, 3 gold medals out of 8 went to websites that Charles developed. So he's going to help us with a little bit about that tonight. And he does the websites for the Philatelic Classic Society, the Philatelic Society of Lancaster County, and Empire State Postal History Society. Martin Miller is the editor of the Pennsylvania Postal History Society Journal and several others. He's had experience working with the APS, the ATA, and U.S. Stamp Society. He has helped to create many digital and print books, events, and websites. He's an expert at this technology too. Martin's also the founder of the Philatelic Press, which is a communications agency focusing on print, web, and virtual presentation tools for the philatelic community. If you have any specific needs that we can't get into the level of detail that you need, please contact Martin at www.philatelicpress.com for the help that you may need. So tonight, I did have a couple of questions that were mailed in since our last one. So I'd like to start off with Martin. I'd like to answer, knock these questions out pretty quickly. We talked about affiliate publisher, design, and photo. And the question was, do they have to be purchased individually, and how do they work together? If you could, take a minute just to explain a little bit about that. And what kind of level. You're on mute too, Martin. You're on mute.
I got it.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for putting this together, and welcome to everybody that's here. That's a good question. Affinity is a software company that creates a variety of tools. There are 3 flagships, and I know that sounds a little funny, but their 3 core products are Affinity Publisher, Affinity Photo, and Affinity Designer. Those are designed to compete directly with the big 3 that are available from Adobe. Designer will compete directly with InDesign, with Adobe Illustrator. Publisher will compete directly with InDesign, and Photo will compete directly with Photoshop. You do not have to have all 3. They are designed to integrate very well together. So if you have a photo that you have worked in Affinity Photo, it will move into Affinity Designer very well. But that is true generally of most of the photo formats and most of the vector formats, vector being what the Illustrator-like tools will create. So you do not have to buy all 3. They are all on sale right now for $25 a piece, so you can get all 3 for $75, but they work very well independent of each other, and they are designed to integrate very well if you have 2 or more of those softwares. So buy one, get very used to it, and then decide what additional capabilities you need. Then you can choose from the others that will meet those needs.
Okay, that sounds great. Maybe we'll go into a little more detail on that down the road. One other question we had was about using images in lieu of a large format scanner. Not everybody has an 11x17 scanner, and so what do you do? What how can you get by if you're writing an article or doing something and don't have the large format scanner? And Martin, if you take a second on that.
Interestingly enough, I had that challenge late last week, a piece much too large, even for a large format scanner. And you've got two options. One is okay, one is not so okay, simply because of the challenges that it brings. I have seen a number of authors, designers who will use a smartphone as a scanner, give you the ability to, if need be, stand up on your desk and put the piece to be photographed on the floor. Be very careful if you do that. But that will give you the ability to capture the image. Here's the challenge. You want your camera plane to be as square to the object that you're photographing as possible. Without a tripod that has a level bubble on it that's designed for a smartphone or a tablet, that is a big challenge. Now, people will say, well, in Photoshop or Affinity Photo, you've got the ability to skew and straighten. Well, you do, but if you're photographing something with very fine engraved edges and lines, that distortion can become very clear. Even if you get the edges of that item clear, straight, square, all your corners are good, tight 90-degree angles, you can still end up with some distortion in those fine lines. And for what we're doing on a philatelic side, that can be a disaster. So be very careful if you try that with a smartphone or tablet. It is easier to do with a good digital camera. And by good, I mean something along the lines of a Sony Alpha line. Now, the Alpha line, the bodies on those cameras can get up to $6,000 or $7,000. What's really nice is they make a killer camera that's in about the $500 or $600 range. It has a very nice leveling feature and one of the best Steadicam functions that I've seen in a modern camera. So if you know you're going to be doing a lot of things that are larger than your scanner, look at the investment of a good digital camera. The smartphone, the tablet's going to create a lot of frustration for you over time. I've tried it extensively, and if you've got no other option and you're on a deadline, you can pull it off, but it'll bring you a lot of headache.
A quick question: what's the name of the $500 one?
I'd have to look it up. There's a Sony Alpha. It's the entry level. Now there's an Alpha 1 through 5,000. So you'd have to do a little bit of researching, but I've got a couple of them in the studio here, and I think I paid about $550 for the most expensive one.
That sounds like a great deal. Okay, and the last question we had, now this was really interesting to me. I hadn't really thought about it very much, but virtual collections. So we have all these images now. We're making ebooks and PDFs and all these ways that we're storing different things. And what do we do about that in the future? Like how we have donations of things after we pass on, or something that's kind of easy when you have something to look at and see. But what about all the virtual stuff, and what might be the future of that? So I'd like to direct that to Scott, to see. I know you guys get a lot of donations of things. Is there ever any intention of, I don't know, some kind of virtual stuff that maybe can't be replaced, and that would be of use to the APS or APRL?
So thank you, and thank you for having me again tonight, Steve. And it's good to see everyone again. Appreciate you taking part in this. It's an excellent question that I don't have a good answer for, but it did get me on the process of thinking about that. Yes, we do accept donations of physical stamps, and certainly by all means, if you've got stamps you want to donate, we're happy to take them along. In terms of the digital imaging, that's one of the things that we really need to dive deeper into, because we need to understand first the ramifications legally for using those images once we get them. And then second to that is the benefit of being able to do that, the quality of the scan that we would want, how the images would look, what we would be able to use them for. I'm intrigued because if there are collectors out there that have got, particularly with covers, who've got good scans that they want to share with us, then that you're right, that could create an incredible archive for research purposes, not just for us internally, but for our membership as well. So it set me down a road to start digging into this. So I don't have an answer right now that I think is satisfactory for the question, but I'm going to get one because it's a great question. And I really do think that's something we should be thinking about.
Cool. And I have a feeling the road's going to lead to Scott Tiffany, huh? Somewhere he's gonna, yeah, I'm sure he has some ideas.
Indeed.
That'll be awesome. That would really be great for research and whatnot if it works out. So we'll stand by to see about how that works out. So I'd like to start the roundtable off tonight with Charlie, and if you would give us an idea of some of the technical challenges that organizations face today managing. And I have a new catchphrase. Instead of, I don't want to be called a webmaster anymore. I want to be an online presence manager. I saw that online. I thought it was such a cool title. And master just sounds so weird. I don't know. So, but managing your online presence, because Charlie has really taken it on, especially for Lancaster, where they have a website, they have all these different things, but bringing in a YouTube channel, all these other things. Now you have to be present everywhere for people to know you're there. So, Charlie, if you'd like to start out with that.
Well, yeah, again, so again, thank you for having us, Stephen, for hosting. I really appreciate it. It's good to be again on the band of Scott and Martin and me. We'll have to come up with a good name down the road. I'm sure we'll figure that out, and I appreciate the opportunity. I'm not sure that I'm a master of any of these things. I think it's just from the past couple of decades of diving on in the earliest days, and it goes back to, I guess, the Classic Societies where it first started. About thinking about it, and I don't look at these as challenges, Steve. I look at these all as opportunities. We have over the era, right, and the years have just looked for opportunities to continue to spread the word of our hobby that we love so much. And, it all started with the printed word, right, in our various newsletters and journals. And over the years, as new media has come up, a number of us have jumped into that arena. And I remember the earliest days of the World Wide Web. When I was a member of the Classic Society and an officer at the time. I don't recall what position I might have had. And it was definitely not webmaster, but then it became that very quickly. Not that I knew how to code in the early days. Not that you need to know that anymore. Now it's pretty easy. Nowadays, it's kind of what you see is what you get, and you can kind of post things to a website. But back in the 90s, it was kind of taking a Word document and typing up a couple of pages to represent your club. And knowing a little bit of hypertext markup language. We'll hear about HTML, and you had to know what a caret meant and what bold and italics and underline and all of that meant to be able to take your written word and have it be visible on a web page. And nowadays, as I look through, it seems like it's almost 30 years later, a lot of that is gone by the wayside because it's become a lot easier. So what I'm saying is you want to have a presence out in a number of different outlets. And one, it is a way to promote your club, your society, your events, what you're doing, where you're doing them, when you're doing them, your newsletter, your members, your presentations, all of those things. And so, you start out early and small when you're beginning, like we did. It was only 4 or 5 pages. And we've now grown. I could speak to all 3 of the websites, the Classics website and the Empire State, as well as the philatelic site of Lancaster County, to, really that is our main avenue of communication. In addition to supplementing our newsletter and or journal, is to have a presence that is updated as often as you can update it, to let folks know where you're meeting and when you're meeting and who's speaking. And then all of those details that members would want to see. They would want to read about your newsletter online and have it available. Have your affiliations. So you're cross-promoting. What are you a member of? What are you a society of? What are you a chapter of? How folks can find you. Locations, dates, and times of where and when you meet. Any messages that you want to send to not just your own members, but to the world around as well, and other areas of the hobby. Who your speakers are, and your speakers bureau. Even just general information, educational information. We, in the earliest days, I know I did because I was just tasked with trying to get as much information out there as possible to share. We had the chatter and we had the Chronicle, but the website offered us through the World Wide Web a way to touch members we hadn't spoken with before, even if they read our journals. The same for the Excelsior and the Bulletin, the same for our newsletter at the Classics. And so I think a presence starting out is important when you think about your society and your club. Is how do you set that up and where do you set that up? And I know it seems sometimes daunting, but there are plenty of tools out there to really help you, and wikis. Oh, and I see a label, stampsoftheworld.com. I see various P8 subjects have been built for a wiki, for example. There is so much information now with many, many different vendors that will host a site for you that have like 3 steps to create a couple of web pages that you can post the information. And almost every society has the basic information of their society. And that's usually enough that you need on a face page or 2 or 3 pages to kind of communicate who you are, what you're about, and why you want to, be a member. We can talk as we evolve over this meeting to other areas beyond the website, like YouTube, which you mentioned, Steve, and having a channel, or Facebook or Instagram, or a couple of other portals, which are very, very popular with a broad array of individuals, even outside of our hobby, that becomes a way to draw individuals into our hobby because they're really interested in these beautiful little icons and images on the stamps that we cherish so much, and the events and the people and the places. Same for the covers. And so I think a website is almost necessary to have, and to have a portal. Societies have them, every club has them, every show has them, and they're actually really not that hard to get into, Steve. So I don't want to dive too far into it other than giving you that primer. But I think, having a site is really key to spread the word, and to draw people in and to attract. And it's sticky. You have stickiness if you've got information and it's current, and you can then spread that out and you can draw more folks. And we've definitely, over the years, through having a web presence, have really attracted members outside of our space who have told us, I found you through your website. And they contacted us through the website. Or now I'm getting, as of today, I'd love to attend your virtual meeting tomorrow night, Charlie. And they came through the Facebook page because I promoted our meeting tomorrow night for the philatelic side of Lancaster County. And Samil that's speaking. And I said, well, and I just contacted them quickly and I sent them the link. So we are getting contacted, not just via traditional email anymore. It's really through our web presence that folks are finding us. And it's really easy to do that and contact us. And we respond in a timely manner, which is what you have to do. So creating the website, not as hard as you might think. Keeping it current, even if it's monthly, is important to show that your club and society are active. And putting information on there in the public domain that anybody can get access to is really important to share the hobby. Because in the earliest days of the web, and I can tell you that for the Classic Society, we had a members domain and we had a public domain. And now I tell you, my friend Dick Winter, who in our many, many meetings early on said, Charlie, I don't like that members domain. We really got to put stuff out there into the world. If we're in the business, we are non-for-profit 501c3 educational institutions that are here to share. So I know membership's important, and paying dues to join our society to get the newsletter and journals are important. But from a website perspective, if we have publications or links or presentations or exhibits, which we talked about, or monographs or vignettes, any of that we can share, we should be putting it on the web. I've been doing that since the day one of the web. And for all of our sites, almost 99% of what we put out there is free to anybody. And it's an attractor for folks to join. And then they get all the other benefits of the camaraderie and the meetings and the social and the journals. So I'll leave, that's my sort of 3-minute opening, Keith, Steve, just to get the conversation started. And then we can really dive in to, website and design and templates and the ease of just starting with an idea, typing who you write, like we talked about for writing an article. If you're at a society, you love your society, you can summarize what your society or club is about. You can put it up on a website and folks will come and visit you. You'd be surprised. So I'll stop there, Steve, and open it up.
That sounds awesome. And Scott, I know you guys do a lot of things to support clubs and societies and, with their online presence. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how the APS has their challenges and how many people you have managing those different, opportunities. I'm sorry. And, how you guys tackle it a little bit.
I'm laughing because the face I see is Martin Miller's. And if you guys want to know something, Martin had a full head of hair and a jet black mustache when he started working for us. And I made a comment, something to the extent of, hey, Martin, I think we need to revamp the website. And he goes, sure, sounds easy. And boy, were we wrong. Yeah. But let me say this. The that project, for all of the pains that went through, I want to talk about results that came from it so that I think you can illustrate it. Now, I'm not going to tell you that every chapter is going to enjoy this kind of success, but you will see similar growth. And when we revamped that website, we launched in October of 2018. Our web traffic that month was approximately 16,000. And today our website traffic is about 45,000. And so really over a 2-year period, we grew astronomically from the web traffic that we were getting to a much more desirable web traffic. Last year alone, we had over 400,000 people come to the website. They spent 10 minutes there. For those of you who know about websites, that's like moving into your house for a couple of weeks, because the typical engagement time is 2 minutes or less for people who come to visit a website. They look for information they're looking for, and if you've done your job, it's easy enough for them to find. They keep moving. But that they come and they find value in our website says a lot. Now, we do have, we call that phase 1. Phase 2 got beset by a couple of different things, not the least of which was the pandemic last year. But for those of you who sat through the board meeting last week, you know that I just got approval to finance phase 2 of this, and that is the completion of the overhaul of the website. And the reason why we did that is because, number one, we want to change the user experience for APS members. That is, give you an easier interface to manage through the website, go through those old classic pages that Martin pulled all of his hair out about, and really give you a way to integrate. The other thing that we're looking for, though, is to expand that service delivery to clubs specifically. Now, for those of you who know, we have about 16 clubs today that use our website as the piggyback their website. That is, we do the page for them. We keep the information updated, you name it. And Martin and I had these conversations years ago, and we're ready to get to that point. One of the things that I want to do is create a security system that allows an individual webmaster, or whatever you want to call the person in your club who manages that information, to be empowered to make those changes themselves. And that way we can expand our service delivery without increasing costs. In fact, today it's $75 if you're running a website off the APS website. My vision is, if we're able to do this, that will we be able to create a website for you at no charge, as long as you're willing to manage it yourself. And that, I think, changes tremendously the level of investment that any club can have. I'll go back and modify a little bit what Charlie said. You have to have a website. And if you've made the decision to have a website, you have got to keep it current always. It is your first impression. It's the vinyl siding on the outside of your house, and choosing whether you're going to have a car up on cinder blocks or in your front yard, or whether you're going to have a nice little wishing well or pink flamingos or whatever else for that matter. But it is the first impression everyone should have of you. And I'll second what Charlie said about giving away content. I know that runs counterintuitive, but we're stamp collectors. By virtue, we are cost conscious. We'll use that word instead. But free information and usable information is always available online for everyone else. What we're doing, what we have an obligation to do, is beat out the bad guys who are giving you bad information and be able to provide worthwhile and useful information. If you do that, if you are of value to someone, they'll keep coming back, and believe it or not, they'll write your $5, $10, $15 check a year to be a member of that organization, no matter how much information you're giving away. So we want to work more closely with the chapters. We think a way of doing that is by some of the changes we're going to make to the website itself, so that we can help you host a real-time usable website. That project's about 8 months away, but believe me, I'm hoping at 22 that I'm able to announce that, and that we're able to line up 50 or more stamp clubs who don't have a web presence today to join in part of doing that, because that digital presence is absolutely essential in this day and age.
That's great to hear, Scott. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, Steve. I mean, we're saying the same thing. And, I didn't have that 25, 30 years ago, and I didn't even have that a couple of years ago. And so you had to go out and you had to figure it out yourself, right? And either find a firm that created the websites and or could host, or two different ones, or some of these simple kits, right, to create them. But if the APS can go that route and really support, chapters and members, and sort of help to do that and facilitate, mediate that, I mean, that's going to be a great boon to so many other clubs and societies around the country, right, beyond that, don't have that capability or ability, and at least give them a kickstart, right? To kind of
Right.
have that presence, because you need to have that presence. I've had that presence, like I said, for 30 some odd years. And we revamped the entire Classic Society site, and I led that effort, in 2012, 2013. And when we revamped and we relaunched that as well, that was a dramatic, increase in our membership and our hits and all that. I can go into those numbers, and Scott touched upon it as well. It was almost felt logarithmic, the amount of folks that were clicking and staying, and the design also helps. You don't want to have too many things buried too deep. You got to have the key information at the high end and a couple clicks down, right? At least, within the first or second. You want to have it really also well thought out of where you put data and how it is laid out, so you can find it in an easy way, things about your society, resources, ways for members to do certain things, an opportunity to donate, find out more, other things around stamps and covers. So the way you also lay out your site's important. But I think, Scott, we're saying similar things here. Yeah, it's got to be fresh. It's got to be current. It's got to be updated. It helps to have more than one person. Pretty easy nowadays to update content on a site if you have more than one individual. And if they can write a Word document and write out some content in a Word, I can get that on the website pretty straightforward. It's not as difficult as it used to be, even images. So, and there's some really great tools and plugins, which we'll get to down the road technology-wise, that really kind of help you. And a lot of those are just, open source, if you will, right? Which we can talk about. So, but I want to let Martin have his opening as well. I didn't mean to take that on after Scott. So, but thank you guys.
No, that's great. And you guys did a great job talking about clubs and societies and needs. Martin, if you could also maybe touch on individuals that want to get started with something. I see so many guys out there that have such extensive, amazing collections that I would love to see, even if it's just from a business card, 1 or 2 page site, up to something bigger where somebody can scan their own stuff and put it online. It kind of segues with the virtual stuff we were talking about. It would be really awesome for the people that are willing to share their collections to have something, a way that they could build their own site too. And so if you touch on that a little, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be glad to. And, just really echoing what Charlie and Scott have said, it's all about a digital presence, an online presence, whatever you want to call it. It's a presence. It's, your footprint or your club's footprint within the digital landscape. And the key is to have the footprint, to be there. And, there are a couple of things that I always tell individuals that are considering, building something, building anything. And the thing I say is, number one, own your traffic. So if you are building a website, make sure that you're using a platform that allows you to own the traffic. Now, if you go to something like Squarespace, if you go to something like Wix or one of the other free builders, there's even a version of WordPress that you can, get free hosting for a WordPress platform. There are places called Blogspot and all of that. The problem with those is, yes, it's easy, but you don't own the traffic. They own the traffic. So when you are found, essentially, they are being found to a higher degree than you are. Now, why does that matter? Because over time, your presence is evaluated by the kings of the internet, which are the search engines, Google being the big one, and a lot of the little ones buy information from Google. But essentially what they're doing is they're looking at a website and they're saying, yes, this is good, or no, this is bad. And one of the bad things is if someone else owns your traffic, because your good content is making Wix look good, and sometimes it'll trickle down to you as well. So, own your traffic, and we can get into hosting and conversations like that later. But when somebody approaches you with something that is completely free, and, this is not geared towards Scott, APS is going to deliver a solution that's very powerful and that is philatelically oriented. But when you see that advertisement on television, about not paying for a website or free, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And that's even more true in the digital sphere of things, because ultimately you're giving away content for someone else to build their business on top of. So own your traffic. Number two, I agree in giving away as much content as you possibly can, but you've got to reserve something or carve out something to build value for your members. When they log in, there's got to be something that the other guys aren't getting. Now, that doesn't mean that you want the other guys to think, well, I'm missing out. Well, maybe you do. You want them to think that a little bit, so they'll say, well, for $25, then I can have all of this too. But I'm not saying that you hold back content, that you hold back information, or that you try to stifle a conversation. For example, with ATA, when we built the new website, we built a store into it. And that store has the ability to offer members a discount. So if you're not logged in, you can order Topical Adventures all day long. If you log in as a member, you order it for $5 less, $7 less, whatever. So that, there's some value to being a member in addition to the journal and all of the other things that you offer them. So use your website to build some value for your members that then becomes a promotional tool for you. The third point is they call it a web for a reason. It used to be a little bit of, just a point to point to point to point. A website was your ability to get on the internet and point to other websites. Well, now it truly is a web. So if your club already has Facebook and you're thinking about building a website, make sure that you build the website so that you can integrate Facebook with that, because then it truly becomes a web. What happens with the search engines is they look for those keywords that are relevant to what the user's after. Somebody types in stamp collecting, and you want to be found in as many venues as possible that point to your ultimate destination. The ultimate destination can be Facebook, but a website gives you a lot more control. There's less likelihood of getting accidentally locked out for something that seems innocuous. And it's an opportunity to have your messaging in multiple places. Facebook is one of the best free platforms. It's the one I would say, yes, go there, because if the search points to you in Facebook, they see you. And then they've got the ability to follow over. So make sure that you're integrating your social media with your website. Like Charlie said, it is not hard. It may be new, it may be different, it may be not done before, but it is not hard. And there are lots of folks that are willing, able, and available to help you get started with that. Now, on an individual basis, this is a great opportunity to address that question of virtual collection. We're talking about scanning our stamps, scanning our covers. What do we do with them? I've seen a number of collectors not do a very sophisticated site, but they dump their entire collection out there and they put information that they know about that cover. And then they tell a friend, and that friend tells two friends, like the old, hair product commercial. And they told two friends, and they told two friends. And all of a sudden, you've got 50 people looking at your collection and saying, hey, I've got additional details about that. So, the personal site is very affordable. Again, own your traffic. Don't go to a free site to build that out, because either you won't own it or they'll disappear and you'll lose it. And, the list of horror stories goes on. But building your own personal site is an opportunity to say, here's what I'm after. I've been contacted by a couple of guys that say, look, I've just put this on my site, and all of a sudden I've got these guys emailing me, is this legitimate? So you may have a concern about the people that find you, but you've got the opportunity to vet those contacts, and you've got the ability to say, hey, this guy's got the 3 pieces that I'm missing, or I've got the one that he's missing and it's not core to my collection. So, that alone is one way to make use of those virtual assets. And it's also an opportunity to expand the conversation well outside the people that you normally come in contact with. Because, if you put it out there and someone shares it, then it's likely someone else is going to share it. That's the value of having it in a digital landscape. Especially if your name's unique, they can Google and find that very quickly. So I encourage digital presence. And, same thing. If you're going to put it on a website, it's very easy to put on Facebook or Instagram. Build that web and people will start to look for you. All of a sudden you'll get questions. I guess a month ago, I got a call from a couple that had inherited a collection, and they found me through a Google search and said, can you give us some advice on this? Simple example, but it's a good opportunity to get your name out there, both within philatelic circles, but also those people that are interested in stamp collecting and can't even pronounce philately.
Well, that's really great input. I appreciate that. And I'd like to just do a real quick thing. Don, I'm going to answer your question here in just a second. But the one thing I would like to say that Martin really talked about was keywords, right? One of the things that's really important is if you do a Google search for something, the top things that come up, right? Those are the kind of words that you should use so that people, because that's what people are searching for, right? Google has tools, but it's important to use the right words and say things the right way, you know? So keywords, just keep that in mind, and I'm sure we'll get into that later, but you want to say it the way Google wants you to say it to get the people to come and see it. So, okay, Don, you had a question?
Yeah, I got two questions. I'm a senior citizen, and when I go to some websites, I notice the fonts and the backgrounds are such that with my eyesight, I have trouble reading them. So I think when you build a website, look at it from a senior's point of view. Will they be able to read it and understand it? The second thing, I used to be a test engineer. Make sure you test everything on your website and ask a senior to do the testing. Don't get a 20-year-old kid to do it. They'll find everything. You need a senior looking at it because we are seniors. Thank you.
Okay, that's great input, and that's all part of, you'll hear the terms UX and UI for user experience and user interface. Those are very important things to somebody building a site. And just for everybody to note that may or may not know, if you use the Control+, Control-, it'll make your text bigger or smaller. So that's a quick and easy way to try and get some bigger text, because I know I have progressive bifocals, and sometimes it's just crazy, but Control+ or Control- can be a help to get started. So,
Steve, I actually want to build. I want to build on Don's point for a second. You know, one of the tools that you can use, and there are varying degrees of this, is a tool called Accessibility for websites. What that does is it allows people with various impairments, whether it's a hearing impairment, vision impairment, they're colorblind, or they have an inability to see font in a certain size. If you have a high volume website, it's probably a good idea to invest in an accessibility tool that allows your web pages to be regenerated in a way that are helpful and useful. Now, the user does have to have some sort of a trigger on their end. That is, they know they have a vision impairment, or they know they're colorblind, and they can adjust things accordingly to make sure that it meets their needs. But our experience with that has been pretty positive in terms of use on the website. Yeah, you can increase the font if it's just, we'll call it, as we get older, I'm having this problem now. I am using computer glasses as we speak, which are different than my progressive lenses, which I use for everyday life, because, you know, the font is smaller and all of those other things. So I need a special pair of glasses just for the computer. But there are tools out there available to you. And if you are getting some traffic to the website, now if you're 20 people in, I don't think that's something you worry about. But as you start to see your web traffic grow, if accessibility is a challenge, there are some very low cost ways to address that I think can be very helpful for people and makes people feel included when you do that.
That's a really great point, and it's something we should all strive for that best experience you can have, because you don't want somebody getting frustrated and not coming back, that's for sure.
Yeah, and some of the hosts, WordPress has so many plugins now that, you can put in place as well that are just, free, that are out there in the open source environment that allow you to make your website very, very facile for anybody coming in to visit at all different levels. In just about every browser on every platform, right? This is ubiquitous now and works across the board. And so that is also a really good, set of tools to know when you're creating it. If you're on the webmastering end of it and you're going through the build, is sort of, there are a couple of key things that you want to at least minimally have on every website that you're looking to build. And a lot of these themes, most of these are simple themes that allow you to pick a theme that you like, a look and feel, change a few colors, maybe it matches your logo, put in your logo. add a banner, add some content, and you're good. And then a few other plugins, minimal, will allow you to have a site that's dynamic with a few drop downs, with a couple of menus, with then content. And written content is key too, right? For the engines to pick up as well, not just a lot of images as well. So we can talk about what makes your site rank a little bit higher when they're searching. But it is, again, a web, and it is presence. And it really, Facebook has also been something that, some of the clubs I work with did not want to go down that path. I said, I'm telling you, when we create it and we tie it to a website, you're going to see traffic go up. And we've seen traffic go up pretty substantially across a couple of the sites once we did that. And then it went up again when we added a YouTube channel, because of course this past year we had a lot of digital content. So it turned out to be good that we were able to get a lot of these video chats and conferences and members, presentations online as well. And that's a great portal again. And if everything is linked from your site and you can get to your other media outlets, and all of those are cross-mapped and linked to yours, which they should be, no matter where anybody lands or they look, they can find all the content that you have available. And your website's going to be, there for ever, however long the web is up and whatever iteration it's going to exist, right? You've creating an archive of your society for now and then moving forward that will continue to grow. And so it becomes a really great archive, irrespective of any one person or your society's historian or archivist and all the paper records that you may or may not keep. Putting all of that online, your journals, your newsletters, your images, your presentations, your meetings, your photographs, your events, that is creating a legacy that will be there for many, many years to come moving forward, which is also a pretty good thing to keep sharing and knowing that you've got that housed. I won't go into what we talked about last time, which was backing up, because you want to make sure everything is backed up, but at least you've got that presence in an area to keep and store everything of your society from day one moving forward in the future, just to add to that. Go ahead, Steve.
So Charlie, I'd like to keep it on a fairly high level, at least right for the moment, but let's talk about WordPress for a second. You mentioned a couple terms that people may not be familiar with. Sure. So if you could maybe explain about a domain name, how you would pick a domain name and why you need one, hosting, right? And then the two other things you mentioned were themes and plugins. And if you just did like a short overview of those four things, that might be enough. I don't want to make anybody's eyes water, or start bulging, right? But maybe those couple terms would be very helpful for people to get started.
We'll start with the name. Every society has a name, and to work on a web browser, everybody knows what URL is, because I know everybody goes to eBay, and eBay has its eBay, right? .com. You need to have a name, right, of your society that will be unique to your society, that would be hosted by those groups that host all these names. I mean, that lock all your names in, and you not every name is available, at least nowadays. And some of those are already issued and owned, and you might have to buy them, maybe spend a little more money. But, when we first created ours for the USPC, we just went with USPCS, .org, and we were fortunate to get it. When I had to get one for the Philatelic Society of Lancaster County a couple of years ago, it turns out that I could not get something as simple as PSLC, which we would have liked. Those are our initials, or even if I would able to spell it out. But so we had to just modify it a bit, and then we locked it in. We acquired it, we purchased it. It is now ours legally, and it's associated with our society, and it is LCPS. So we went with Lancaster County Philatelic Society, and we used -stamps.org. That's just what was available at the time, and that's what we got. But you need to have that official name for the web that's associated with your society. And that's really the first thing that you need to do. And that's what Network Solutions now is, the worldwide leader, right? Really, of I guess the keeper of a lot of these, and there are other organizations, but that's sort of where you go, and you lock in your society with the name, your address, your organization with that, and then you become that owner of that particular name for your site. And you may have one or two, but we'll just stick to the one. I hope, Steve, that's enough. And I know that Scott and Martin
that's a good thing. And
could add to that, but
he can definitely expand on it. But one thing that's really important, I think Charlie brought up a good point about the domain name. Once you think of that, right, and you're going back to the same thing that I was talking about before, ask 10 people, if you were looking for our club, what words would you use? And then you want to try and get your domain name as close to that as possible, make it easy for them, not something complex. But one thing that is kind of important is you have to have a hosting account also for when you do actually do your site. If you don't do like what Scott's talking about, they would actually be hosting it. Otherwise, you're hosting it. It can be separate, right? So if you have an idea about a domain name, do it right now. Do it as quickly as you possibly can. Worry about the hosting later. That's okay, right? Because that's anybody will give you, you pay for hosting, they'll take care of you. But that domain name could be gone tomorrow. You just never know. So it's something you want to think about. Like, and you should grab your own name. If you can get, SteveKennedy.com, go out and get it for posterity, right? For put your stuff. Even
Well,
if you
I
don't
do
plan
own
to do it
DiComo.
for
I do
years.
have DiComo.com,
Yeah,
right? So I did when I
yeah.
was able to grab it. So I have
Right.
that for myself and my family, and it's
Right.
just associated, and I can do what I want for your society. Once you have that name, that's
Yeah.
the name you'll have.
Right, lock it
That's
in.
what the
So,
community will know you by, because that's what you're going to market and promote, and all your
Right.
sites are everything's going to link back to that domain name.
So Martin, maybe if you could talk a little bit about maybe hosting and what type of account somebody would need, from an individual up to a business thing, and then also maybe explaining that thing about the themes and plugins, the differences between those, what they do, kind of.
Sure. Yeah, be glad to. Well, if we talk about the domain name as the address for your website, it's the street address, it's the place, the human readable information as to where your website exists. That address ultimately points to a computer somewhere in the world. Now, you'll hear a lot of people talk about cloud and cloud computing and cloud hosting. It all boils down to this: regardless of what they call it, somewhere there's a computer with a hard disk with a network connection that's making up your website. It is the physical existence of the site. I don't really care what they call it. The one thing I would say, or add on to domain, Charlie mentioned network solutions. When you register that domain, pay a little bit of extra money and get it with a reputable registrar. Network Solutions is good. I have had extremely good luck with GoDaddy. I've got several clients that use what I call the second tier, things like Bluehost and JustHost.com. Those are very solid. Don't go to the ones that that appear today and may change their name tomorrow. Go with a big name, and we can share with you a list of big names, because a lot of those guys will also offer that additional service you're going to need called hosting. Hosting comes in many forms. The key to understand is that the domain is the address. It's what people are typing in. It points to your hosting account, which exists somewhere on a computer. On that computer, you're going to have software that makes up your website, and one of those softwares is called WordPress. So hosting is, depending on how big a site you're going to have, it's either a monthly or an annual subscription that you pay to a company that gives you space on a computer server somewhere in the world. There are lots of add-ons. There are lots of additionals that you can get. Really, for what we're talking about, there are two recommended options. Number one, and this is low end, you have to be very careful with this. It's called managed WordPress hosting. It's a service where your provider, somebody like GoDaddy or Network Solutions, would say, okay, here's your login information. And when you get there, it is a pre-configured WordPress site. So literally, if you liked the look, you could go in and start making pages and putting in text and images. Now, I say that's low end. It's probably good for individuals and very small clubs. But when your traffic rate goes up, and when you need to make updates on a more regular basis, or when you need the site to do more things, we'll talk about plugins in a minute, then a managed WordPress hosting account gets a little bit problematic. It will not handle large volumes of traffic. It will not handle a lot of updating. So if there are two of you in the club, both of you are willing to do the updates, and you try to log in at the same time, a managed WordPress hosting account is going to be a little bit of trouble. Now, there's also what's called cPanel, control panel hosting. This gets a little more technical. However, the big guys like Network Solutions and GoDaddy and GatorHost all have one-click installs. So basically, you can get this little more robust hosting account. Remember, this is a computer with a hard disk somewhere that's going to be the home for your website. You click a button and it literally installs WordPress and then drops you into the administration tool. So let's go a step further. The domain there is where people are going to come find us. The hosting account is basically that computer that's going to be putting our website out there. And that website's going to be made up of software like WordPress. WordPress is what's called a content management system. It is a series of software designed to do two sides. One, the back end that nobody ever sees except those guys who are tasked with managing it. And then the front end, this is where everybody goes to see your website, to download your newsletter, to get in contact with you for that matter. Now, there are intermediaries. You can have a login access for members, et cetera, but we'll not cloud it up at this point. WordPress is the tool that's going to put the site out there. And there are at least two major additions or tools with WordPress. One is called a theme. A theme is a set of files that basically you pick to install on the site. The installation process is really one click. You tell it which theme you like, and the theme is just that, the look and feel. It's the, well, a lot of times you can change the theme's colors, but they'll present it as a color scheme, the way the pages are laid out, whether it has a sidebar with menus, whether it has a footer. Basically, what your page design looks like is determined by that theme. Now, if you're really adventuresome, if you're a software developer by career, you can create your own themes. But I will tell you, generally speaking, it's a better solution to go out and select a theme. WordPress includes a whole variety of free ones. And for anywhere from about $10 to $60, you can have some really impressive themes that make your site look fantastic. A lot of them will even pre-populate the site with certain pages. You have the ability to have your home page, your about page, your join us page, your contact page as an example. And that's kind of the minimum for a good size site. The other tool is called a plugin. A plugin is basically a software add-on. So let's say that you've got a website and you think, okay, I want people to be able to email me directly from one of the pages on the site. You use a little tool called a plugin. Just for conversation, I use one called Ninja Forms. And that plugin gives you the ability to say, all right, on this page, I want a field for their name, for their email address, and what their question is. Then a submit button. You publish that. Literally, you click the publish button. That goes online. And then when people fill that form out, it gets emailed to whomever you want. Those plugins can be things like that. They can be the accessibility tools that Scott was talking about that help you judge how your site is seen by others, as well as giving others a clue that if they are colorblind, you have settings available for that. Plugins range from that to full e-commerce. If you decide, all right, we want to sell our books online, there are plugins that will do that. That gets a little more complicated, but there are plugins that will do virtually anything you want, especially present PDFs so that your newsletter can be read easily online. So there's a very good, well, several very good free plugins for WordPress that will make that possible.
Like
So,
3D flipbook. I mean, you could really get very,
Yeah,
but I'm not
well-
crazy about that. But there are ones that will give you the page turning as well.
oh yeah,
Or
and the
this-
sound.
and the sound.
The challenge with plugins is that some of them are written very efficiently,
Yes.
and some of them are dogs.
Some are not. That's right. Absolutely.
And when you get too many plugins, your site will slow way down. You'll start to have incompatibilities. The problem right now is that WordPress will throw an error and it will say, hey, look, you've got a conflict between some of your plugins. We have no clue which ones, so you go find it and you fix the site, and then it'll be back online.
Yeah.
So you have to be judicious in your use of plugins. I've seen people, install things just to see what it will do. That's a bad idea. think about what you want your site to accomplish, then look for the tools to make that happen. Those
And to add the
tools
plugin too, Martin, I mean, a lot of us show images, right? So that's the other
Mhm.
thing. It's not just it's finding the right gallery, right? In Vera or NextGen or whatnot, because we show a lot of stamps and covers. And so that's the other thing that's important on the site too, is to land on the right plugin that's going to allow you to upload whatever those are, save those in a number of various subfolders as well, right? And then be able to present those images in a logical fashion too. So there's a couple of things to modify there.
Yeah, the nice thing about the current family of plugins, especially on the image size side, is that most of them do the resizing for you.
That's right.
So what I've been telling clients that have WordPress sites is, scan it at a good size. You've got plenty of space to house your site. That's part of the hosting account. Pay a little extra, get a little extra space. Right now, GoDaddy, if you get their standard, you get unlimited space. So, put that, 4 megabyte image out there. It's not going to slow your site down because the plugin's only going to use as much data as it has to have to give a good image. So, Charlie's right. Those image plugins are very powerful. Just do a little bit of research. When you look at plugins through WordPress, it will give you a star rating. Those seem, from my experience, to be fairly accurate. If any plugin has less than 4 stars, stay away from it. I don't care if it's the only one that will do what you want. Stay away from it. It's likely to cause you problems.
Absolutely.
The one thing they also put on there too is how long it's been around and how many people are currently using it. That's a big
Correct.
thing for me. If 200,000 people are using it, I feel much better than if 2,000 are using it. That's for sure.
Yes.
So
Yeah, there's some other things too to track as well. We don't know if you want to go deep into breadcrumbs or broken links, because those are other things. If your site continues to grow and you're cross-linking and promoting others and sending your members or guests to other sites, links do change. And so it's another thing if you're hosting it too, is nobody wants to come to a site and see a lot of things hashed out or crossed out because they're not functional. That's not good for a user experience as well. And so there are some really simple plugins also that help to automate your site as well, and also look for broken links, which helps you if you're maintaining it on the back end, because you get very simple alerts. I mean, I get email alerts for all the 3 or 4 sites I oversee for key things that are going on. The other thing we should talk about is the security of this. Yes. It's how you log into the back end, which is really key. And I use a multiple layer authentication where I have to have a separate app on my phone with my face recognition to have me key in a separate key like VPN, a virtual private network. So security is also really important for content and keeping your site locked down so that nobody gets access to it. I don't know how much more detail we want to go in, but there's really good security with a really reputable host and how you create your account and logging in, and you can use 2-factor authentication. Some of our websites house some interesting detail that you do not want others to get access to at any time, and you don't want your site to get hacked and go down, period. So you want to also make sure, like with your own email and your own all your other material, that you've got a security feature in place as well. And a lot of these sites do a really good job of that, and the hosts, just to add on to what Martin was saying.
Well, that's all good, and that's probably as deep as we might need to go right at the moment for WordPress. I mean, it's just one platform. It's just that we kind of find it easier, and there are definitely plugins. I use one that I highly recommend if you manage more than one website. It's called Manage WP. I mean, I basically I hit 2 buttons and I'm updating 10 websites at one time, and it optimizes them for spam comments and all that. Basically 1 button for each thing. I do it 2 times a day, and I'm like right on top of 10 websites. So it's kind of cool. So that's a good one. But one thing I would like to talk about a little bit more is the social media part, because one of the things that we're saying that everybody needs to have a website, but at some point, at least to get started, right? If that's too overwhelming to start with, at least having a Facebook page is probably a good thing to talk about. And there needs to be, maybe we need to discuss a little bit about a workflow, right? So do you put stuff to Facebook first, then Facebook pushes it somewhere else? Do you put it Instagram, YouTube, or put it all on your website? And then there's plugins, once again, that'll push it out to these other sites. If you guys have some, maybe Scott, if you talk about that, I know you're you guys, APS is involved in all of those different places and have great, channels, and the education program's great. So maybe if you talk a little bit about yours.
So the thing to remember with social media is that each version of social media has its own audience. One of the things that I like to emphasize is that, Facebook is a safe place to start. And going back to the website, I'd say the same thing, which is, look, remember, Charlie and Martin and I are an accumulation of a bunch of really good and really bad decisions over the last 3 decades that have gotten us here. I start simple and build your way out from there. You don't have to go with the Cadillac website to begin with. And the same thing is true with your social media. The reason why Facebook, I think, is the safest place to go is, one, it's the one that our age group is most familiar with. It's an incumbent. It's been around for 15 years now. Most of us have been able to use it for at least the last decade. We know the audience that's there for the most part, and we're able to put information there, and people will find it. Varying the messaging up a little bit, and that is, the one thing I always advise people to do is, you really shouldn't have multiple people managing your Facebook account for a club. At best, 2. And the reason why I say that is because you want to create a little consistency in what you're delivering, both in terms of the quality that you're putting up. No offense, but if you've got 5 people who are managing your Facebook page for you, everybody feels obligated to have a good idea. And that means they feel obligated to put something up. That doesn't necessarily create engagement. That is what you're after, where we talk about with the website, and that's a passive place to put information. Here, we're talking about, we don't just want to put information. We want to build an audience. We want to communicate with people. If we post something on our Facebook page, for instance, it's inevitable we're going to get questions about the event that we're doing, or someone's going to message us and go, hey, I just saw this and I inherited my great uncle's stamp collection. And then they'll have a series of questions to go with that. So what you really want to be able to do is create simple, consistent scripting that you can follow. So say, for instance, somebody, you start getting a bunch of messages going, oh gosh, I really want to come to your next meeting. Well, here's 3 lines that gives that answer. And it doesn't matter who asks the question or who answers the question. Here's 3 lines. This is when we meet. This is where we meet. Bring cookies because everybody brings something. And it's as simple as that. And that way you are able to build a little bit of message discipline, because that engagement is in real time and people want to feel valued when they hear it. So you also want to make sure that when someone sends a message, it doesn't sit there for a couple of days. Your response rate is important in how you manage things. That's measured in broadcast, by the way, on that page, so people know that if they leave you a message, it doesn't take 3 weeks for you to get back to them. So you want to mix it up. Images are always nice. Videos are always nice. Short is better. We have a tendency in the hobby to spend a couple of hours talking about things, but really there's a value in a 5-minute video. So for instance, if you have a fun little thing that you've done, putting that video content up does tend to create more traffic. People tend to find it. And guess what? If it's under 5 minutes, they'll watch it. As crazy as that sounds, I can explain to you the science behind it. I won't go into it if we don't need to, but for whatever reason, you get to a 5-minute or less video clip, people find that interesting and they'll invest that amount of time. If they see something's 25 or 50 minutes, they'll go, I'll come back to it later, and later never comes. So the other thing that I like to emphasize is good imaging. That is, if you're going to put a picture up, remember what we talked about the last time, be true to the image. Don't feel obligated to pretty it up and decorate it up and overexpose it and try to modify the colors. The reality of stamp collecting is very valuable in and of itself. Convey that to people, share that with people, and let them understand what it's all about, especially if you can give them a piece of information, not 5, just 1. So for instance, if you have a cover that's got something very unique about it, post it up, ask people what they think, what they see is wrong with it. It'll be fun to see how many answers you get, and then you can come back later and provide the answer. So that's what you want to do. You want to be able to throw things out there that give them a reason to engage you on social, ask questions, dig deeper. And those are ways to do it. Very simple ways. They're very effective ways. And that's what we continually look for, is how are we engaging our audience?
That's absolutely awesome. And just a segue on that a little bit, a couple of you guys have mentioned about metrics and analytics and how do you measure if you're doing a good job. I mean, a lot of people, they'll build their website, but they never even look at the dashboard to see how many people visited or how long they stayed, like you were talking about. So I think it's really important to have some idea, have some goals, and work towards those, doing just the exact things that you're talking about. Some of the best posts I've had on Facebook have basically just been questions asking, tell me something about yourself that nobody knows. A simple question, whatever. And it's amazing. You get many more people engaging on something simple like that than a serious question about something. So every so often you throw out some light, type of thing, or and you guys know you've been in clubs forever, right? Sometimes you have a question at your staff club meeting. Who knows about this? Who knows about that? Whatever. It's a great way to engage people because people like to see that kind of stuff. So maybe Martin, if you just talk a little bit about maybe the metrics. I don't know if you have something else that maybe you'd like to add on top of what Scott's doing with all those different channels and how to manage them.
Well, I think one of the compelling points to make is that when you establish where your social presence is going to begin, and I agree with Scott, Facebook is probably the smartest place to start for a club. Really, the first thing to do before you even open the account is establish the rules for the page. We all know that there are people who like to disagree for the sake of disagreeing. And unfortunately, sometimes they're very passionate about disagreeing, and they will take out their frustration on your Facebook page. And all of a sudden, you've got a thread of conversation that started out, isn't this a beautiful cover, and ends up with, I hate you and everything you've ever said. So I'm exaggerating a little bit, but one of the smartest things to do is establish some rules for your page. There are a lot of pages that are members only. Usually it's a matter of setting it up so that they answer, 3 very, very basic questions. One, you're proving that they're a human being, not a robot. And number 2, you're establishing that dialogue so that in the process you present them with the rules that say, this is for fun. You're not going to post this kind of material. You're not going to make this kind of comment. If you do, we have a 1 strike or 2 strike or 3 strike policy. And after that, you're banned for life. I'm sounding a little flippant. That's not the intent. It will save you a lot of heartache. It will save your members heartache. It will save a lot of hurt feelings and upset over the things that can happen in social media. So, long before you get to the page, establish the rules and make sure your leadership agrees, because sometimes it'll come down to, hey, this to me is a gray area, but to Charlie, he may say, you know what, this is absolutely over the line. We've got to stop this right here. But that is very important to make sure that your leadership is in agreement on. And then you can get into things like the metrics. Facebook will give you good information on the website of things. At the absolute minimum, install Google Analytics. Yes, it gets more technical, but they're very good plugins that make it super simple. And they will even give you the step-by-step to follow to get what you need from Google to make that happen. Most of them will even present the analytics within your website. So you can go and see, okay, last week we had 20 people come. This week we've had 55, and most of them are going to these particular pages. You will find with a website that everyone has a pet page. The pet page, if Scott will bear with me, the pet page mentality at APS, when we started the overhaul, we did what's called a crawl, and we discovered that the APS website had 32,000 pages. Let that sink in, 32,000 individual pages. So analytics will tell you a lot of things. It told us that about 31,000 were never accessed, had not been updated in a great length of time. So analytics will do a couple of things. Number 1, it will tell you who's coming to your website, who's using the site from the terms of, okay, where are they located? Are they, in Lancaster County, or are they in, Bhopal, India, for example. So it will give you a lot of information about the people that come to the site, how long they're staying on pages. And you've got those analytics in all of the platforms. You've got it on the web, you've got it in Facebook, you've got it in Instagram, you've got it in Twitter, any place that you might have an account. I would say probably your third or fourth step is to look into analytics. Get comfortable with the site. Like Scott's saying, develop the tone, especially in social media, develop a cadence. You know, if every Thursday you're posting Throwback Thursday, people will come to expect that. And you will find that you have a following, which is extremely valuable, because then you start putting in other bits of information that will point them to your other points of presence. So if you've got a lot of people on Facebook, they're waiting for that Friday freak out or whatever you call it, start to filter in things like, hey, learn more on our webpage that you feature that cover on, or you feature that stamp on. So analytics are there, but get a firm established presence first.
Yeah, so I want to echo both too, just real quick, because I mean, we're talking about consistency of messaging. This is PR and marketing,
Yes.
like 101, right? Of the basics of what we're doing here to try to promote and market our hobby and our society and our club and all that we stand for, and then cross promote it. I like and I share everything, at least when I can, what the APS puts up, and maybe they like what I put up, and there's ways to tag, and then other societies and clubs do this as well. But this is really the consistency of message, right? Your logo is going to be there. Your mission statement's going to be there. Your meetings, where you meet, when you meet, links to your newsletter, some basic information. And that's why I agree with both of you. Facebook's a really, really good first step and easy entry into this space to promote your club. If you haven't gone to the website yet to create a website, because it does have essentially what you have on your website, you can put on your Facebook page and you get that consistency of, I know our meetings are every second Wednesday and fourth Wednesday. A few days before that meeting, I'm posting our newsletter. The day before, I'm posting who's speaking, a little blurb with a link to the website. So that consistency is really important. And little teasers will get folks to expect it. They will come back. They like consistency. And then things get shared. And now other societies are sharing them, and you're sharing them back. It's amazingly pervasive how the web grows very quickly if you're out there and you're putting new content on a routine basis. That goes, like we said, for content is king in this space, and we got a lot of content. And if we've got 2 or 3 portals to push it out, it is amazing that cross. And you said it is really a web, Martin. When I started the first website, I feel like it was 3 decades ago. There were like 6 of them. It was a desert. And somebody would find you, and then very quickly you became lost as the millions of sites became up there. And then how do you push through? We've got a pretty big community here in the philatelic community, and so leveraging that is really important as you go down this path, and cross-referencing and cross-linking and cross-promoting. It's really important to do that. I just wanted to add that to what Scott and Martin said.
Let me use.
Go.
I was going to use an example that's not an APS example. So, and that is the American Topical Association. So I know every Tuesday when I get up that there's a Topical Tuesday post that's coming on Facebook. And what has developed as a result of that is thematically people are preparing to then share images and engage each other. But when you go and look at those posts, what you see are a number of collectors who've brought their own image to share in the theme that we're talking about for Topical Tuesday, whatever that is. And so you'll go and look at that thread that follows that post, and what you'll see is a lot of engagement. And we are by our nature, as much as anyone hates to admit this, but we are by our nature a social hobby. And they've established a very consistent message point that we hit on every Tuesday. You can rely on it. People post through the week, they'll feed images into that thing and go, oh yeah, I was thinking about this stamp, and they share it. And it really creates an opportunity to exchange more than just I'm a stamp collector, you're a stamp collector. It really gets into an applied level of engagement. And I think that's a great example to show anyone that if you want to try something like that, don't do it on Tuesdays, but there are 6 other days during the week that I'm sure the ATA would be more than happy to participate in helping you out with.
You know, that's a great example, and let's shift it over a little bit and give another example of the way to build that web and the way that web works for you. So, you know, a lot of you do newsletters or journals. You do some sort of regularly scheduled publication. So what you do is you take that publication, you got a nice cover image, and you post that on Facebook and say, just go into press. Here is, you know, the July edition. Okay. You'll get information, but in that post, you're also going to link back to the website. So on your website with WordPress, you actually have a type of content called a post. It's a great way to keep your website up to date on a regular basis. So on your website, you make a post that says, hey, we put this on Facebook. And by the way, here's an excerpt from the cover article. You know, it made the cover, so here's some content for you, world, you know, enjoy. And by the way, at the bottom, it's got click here to join for the full edition. So you take your content through various stages. You give a little bit away in social, you give a little more away on your website and say, hey, look, folks, there is so much more. For $25 a year, you can have it all. So that also builds your web wider. Scott's talking about great broad engagement, and then you've got the ability to focus it down to get them to take the action you want. Join us and get more.
Yeah, it's called a CTA, right? Call to action. That's the thing you always have to be thinking of, right? So one thing I'd like to get.
Actually, Steve, I want to, because this is internally, this is what I explain to folks. That is the objective of every piece of digital content that we do. Number one is that it educates, conveys knowledge. Number two, it builds a sense of community. And then number three, it's got to have a call to action. That is believe me, the directors can repeat it as soon as I start saying it at this point, because that's my mantra. And I think that good content has those three things built into it every time. And it's really not as hard as you think it is to make all three of those things happen. And I think that's the key to building successful engagement. Martin raised a point, and this is something we identified when we found those thousands and thousands and thousands of pages that no one went to. One of the things that we did find is what are the most engaged pages we have here? And what you'll notice over time is that Join Now has been added. This is something I'd like to say to chapters, and that is you have your membership information on one page. You don't have to do that. Every piece of real estate you have is your piece of real estate. And you want to get to that call to action. Don't make it hard for them to join your club. Make it obvious that they should join your club. And so where you have other pages where people are logging in and checking things out, if it's a free preview of a piece of information that you have in a newsletter coming up, then great. By the way, if you get the full page, like Martin said, call to action. If you have a dealer page like we do, and it is the second most visited page on our website, well, guess what? You can join if you're not a member. And so that's what you need to remember, is that getting people to come to your website is one thing. That call to action moment is something you really need to be deliberate about. And remember, always be closing memberships. That's the thing. That's a critical piece of information.
Great advice. So one thing, I don't mean to rush on this. I know Charlie has to leave before too long. So I just wanted to get a little input. I know this is something on your mind right now. You've been doing all these Zoom meetings and different presentations, and we're getting back to live meetings now. So we're going to have hybrid, these hybrid live streams, right? So I know there's some things going through your mind that maybe you would at least share that before if you have to go. But what are your considerations, and how are you going to keep your members involved? You've had 40 and 50 people on these Zooms, right? How are you going to do that moving forward? If you care to share a little thought.
Are you asking me, Steve?
Yes, please.
Well, I mean, I think so that's interesting as we start to think about coming out of this, and we definitely discuss not stopping at least once a month our virtual meetings, and we know that we're going to definitely do that. This is the fourth Wednesday of the month, and So Steve is applauding because, you know, how we could get folks to join us from all across the world. We've had folks from Australia come on to our meetings a couple of weeks. I mean, so it has really changed the dynamic of the hobby. And we're working on, when we get back to live, to try to live stream, to share. But we sure as heck are not going to stop doing our virtuals, at least for those members that live beyond the scope of our region. And we've definitely grown over the past couple of years. You know, we've almost not 2.5 times the size we've grown. We're going to keep those going. We will do Zoom meetings moving forward. We think the content is there. Folks want to present and folks want to listen. And they've been amazingly engaged, whether it's 30 or 60 or 70 that we've had on our society meetings. And we are working to discuss how we're going to do that. If we could do that when we find a venue to meet live, to do it live as well. We had a really good gig before we closed down, which had really great technology and a large meeting space that could house almost 100 folks with state-of-the-art monitors and a dais with great audio, the whole thing. So if we can get back to that and find that same location, which we're going to look and see if we can make all of our meetings, one a live stream, and then the second one just a pure play. We're not going to meet at a venue. We're going to just do what we've been doing for this past year. That's the short and sweet right now where we're at.
Right.
And that's what we're looking at for the Society of Lancaster County. I think others are absolutely going to continue to do the same as well, and maybe do a hybrid, and we're going to find a balance.
So
folks definitely want to meet. Yeah, they want to meet. Go ahead, Steve.
I mean, do you think you'll I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but do you think you'll live stream those, or will you take the process of okay, we're going to record it and then we'll put it out?
So we're looking at both options, and what the technology is to do it, and it's just us making the investment and being able to do it. At least if I can record it to start and make that available, great. Before we locked down, always put the presentations up online. Our presenters were very gracious in allowing us to put the PowerPoint up and share that, and then a couple of photos and images. And even if you weren't there, you still felt like you could have been in the room and you can at least see the content. Right. That was part of the giveaway. Now that we're used to, you know, these sort of venues that we're doing, and the content for us is our presenters are on the YouTube channel, ours, and then it's out there, you know, as well to see, and you could always go back to it. We've got to find a way to continue to do this. And if it's not live, I want to record it and I want to put it up there. Right. But we will that second meeting of the month. We want to have 24 meetings instead of 12. I'm definitely going to be able to do that at least 12 times a year, have a virtual meeting. And I think that's going to be great for our members that might not be able to get to every meeting. So
it sounds like something that would be great to do another roundtable on is the hybrid meetings, because I'm a member of the Rotary, and we've actually got a tech guy that's part of it. So he's actually got a laptop hooked up, and then a camera pointing towards the speaker and the screen, and they use the laptop with the camera facing out. So the people at home can see both. They can see the speaker and the screen, and they can also see the audience. But there's some technical parts, you know, that you have to put together, and what level you're going to go to and how much your club can afford to spend to do that. Obviously, you know, if cost is no object, you can get some great stuff. But there's people that you are going to be able to use phones to do it. So I did want to maybe go over to Martin. I don't know, maybe you have some ideas on some of this technology, you know, with trying to get to the hybrid part of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm actually meeting with a client tomorrow to talk about the exact same thing, but short of a big investment, one of the things that I've discovered in the last 7 to 10 days is that if you are close to a major library or close to a major university, in some cases they have earmarked time for community engagement where you can go in and use some very high-end meeting facilities. I know Clemson University is making some space available for, you know, the exact type of thing that we're talking about, especially once everything is fully open to capacity. Go to a university and say, hey, look, you know, who's your, you know, community engagement person, and, you know, tell them what you're trying to accomplish. Because in some cases, we're talking about some significant investments in technology. You know, there are, you know, basically speaker following cameras. There are very good high-def wireless cameras that will allow multi-share Zoom meetings. So basically you can have a presentation view of your speaker and their slideshow. You can then split it between the speaker and the audience, like was just discussed. But you're talking about some investment, especially in technology and time. But I also heard in some of the larger metro areas, there are libraries that have the same level of capability, and their mission is to make it available to the public. So start with a relationship. Go to the librarian, go to the digital librarian or the resources librarian, and say, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. In our area, there are 2 libraries that have the capability. So if you go to one that doesn't, they should know to introduce you to the person responsible at the other facility. So short of getting into money for technology, look at universities and look at libraries for those capabilities.
We're
That's
also
great.
checking a local museum that's here in Lancaster because I'm the president of the board of the North Museum, and they've got 2 phenomenal rooms and technology, and they want to get back to business just like we want to get back to business, and they want to start hosting these events too. And some of these talks are absolutely relevant, and there's some synergy between programs. So same for colleges, libraries, and museums as well. So we are looking at those 3 too, Martin. So it's a great point. I did not mention that, but we're looking at all opportunities to get us back together and to be able to still stream as best as we can, or at least record. So
Right.
I know Scott can probably piggyback on and say the same thing as well.
Yeah, I think it's before you invest any money, I think it's absolutely critical to know your resources, because some of these things can be cost prohibitive, or you may decide either you're not able to identify the best possible technology to use, and you end up you throw good money after bad, right? You buy something that isn't necessarily what you need. I tell the story a lot. About 4 years ago, we attempted to do a live record of a on the road course in Portland, Oregon. And by virtue of the classroom, the speaker was standing in front of a window, or a dual set of windows, looked really good and wonderful. So the morning session looked fantastic. And then the sun came. And the next thing you know, it was basically this dark figure in a ball of light. It was almost Christ-like looking at him in the afternoons. There he's standing there and he's got his arms spread out and he's talking, and you see nothing but this ball of energy. And so, we went through and tried to do editing of the video to maybe clean it up a little bit. The sound quality was great, but it didn't do you any good if you couldn't see anything. So the one very simple fix to everyone's problem about seeing the presentation, really, that's the star of the show, right? The speaker and the presentation. Get a copy. Hear me out. This is a real simple fix. Get a copy of the PowerPoint in advance. If you have people watching by Zoom, you can put that screen up yourself and you can advance the slides while the speaker is talking, as long as they're mic'd and you can hear the speaker. And there are some very simple ways to fix that. The audio side of this isn't really the problem. It's always the visual side that's a bit of a challenge. And so if you're able to do some very quick shortcut things like that, say, I'm going to get a copy of the PowerPoint and I'm just going to advance the slides for you, or Dave from our club is going to do it because he's the guy who runs the computer, and he's just going to advance those slides for you. The people watching will stay engaged. They'll stay awake, I hope, and they'll continue to pay attention to what it is. And there's a real value to that presentation. And oh, by the way, you can record it and you can use that AV to put up online or share with members who weren't there. So it's a very simple fix. Now, we can get more complicated from there about how you can broadcast a little bit differently. There are clubs out there. Believe me, this bad boy right here could do a lot more than you think it can. And so don't be afraid to start with your phone first, again, before you invest money in technology. Figure out what you need and figure out what you have, and you'll probably discover you don't need nearly as much as you thought you did when you started this. But I cannot encourage us enough. After the last 15 months of seeing people engage in stamp clubs that have been unable to come to the meetings for a number of personal reasons, we cannot go back. We have got to have all of our collectors engaged and let them feel engaged in every way that we can. So I strongly encourage it that we do figure out how we get Zoom set up, and we'll guinea pig, trust me, we'll be the test pilots for a lot of different things over the next few months. We'll make some bad decisions and some bad mistakes. We'll make some good decisions and some good outcomes, but At the end of it all, if we have another conversation 6 months from now about what hybrid meetings look like, I will be a war veteran by then, and have a lot of things you shouldn't do.
And you might not have any hair. So you and Martin, the band will be, I'm just saying,
Yeah,
Scott,
it could
be
happen.
careful, buddy. Be
So,
careful.
so one thing I'd like to just tie things together a little bit, and I thought maybe we could do something for some, I put down here, handy technology software. I know each, and this could be something where we go around to everybody, but I just want to start it off with one little tip about something I've been using that's a technology thing that I think is really cool. And it comes back to the vision thing, is I got a digital microscope. Those things, they're, you can get them very inexpensively on eBay or Amazon or whatever now. If you guys haven't tried it, I would just like to throw out there that you might really like it, because you can really zoom in on things. You can take pictures of things in the microscope, and you can take video in there. And I'm talking about something that costs about $50, and it's USB, just plugs into your laptop or your computer. And trying to find all those little fly specks on there. I tried to use every kind of different magnifying glass. Nothing's worked as well as this digital microscope. So I just wanted to share, that as one of the things that works really well for me. And I thought maybe you guys might have some too, and maybe we can open it up after you guys talk about like your favorite tip or trick or handy dandy thing that you use.
Yeah, I see Tom just posted
Yes.
he's used the magnifier on his
Absolutely.
phone, and I was going to say, if you've got an iPhone, and unless you've changed the default settings when the iPhone is unlocked, if you triple press the home button, the magnifier will come up, and is very, very useful. You can zoom in, you can take stills, etc. But that has been very useful to me, especially at in-person stamp shows like the Great American Stamp Show coming up. So I always have that in my pocket. So, if I drop my loop or leave it in the room or whatever, I've always got my phone, and that's a fantastic magnifier. Now, I'm going to show you one other thing that I've been using a lot. In certain situations, especially when talking about a virtual meeting and filming it or recording it. Yeah, Zoom gives you the ability to record. If you're doing a lot of them, you've got to be pretty diligent to download your recordings, because it fills up pretty fast unless you got a big account. Well, I've got an average Handycam Sony video camera. And what I did is I went and I bought CamLink. And what CamLink does is it plugs into my computer. It lets me plug into my camera. So what I'm doing is using the camera as my Zoom camera, and I have the camera doing the recording at a higher resolution than what Zoom will give me. So if it is a very detailed presentation, if we're showing a lot of fly specking, then that is a great way to capture the content at a little better quality than what Zoom will offer by default. So that's an easy way to make good use of an existing video camera or digital SLR that has video capabilities as well. So it's from Elgato, and it's called CamLink. It works with a USB port and an HDMI cable.
I would also recommend really quickly, Elgato. It makes some awesome products. They make a great green screen. If you go on
Yes.
Amazon, just put in ELGATO and check on their products. I think you'll be happy with anything you get there. So I definitely endorse that too. So Scott, I know you have something that's Apple makes that maybe is your favorite technology tool.
All of Apple's products are my favorite technology tool. And Martin can relate. We share an abundant love of Apple products. But and I'll put in a quick plug for Martin. I can say this, having known him now for, God, we're going on 5 years now, Martin. If there's a we'll call it a low cost alternative to any expensive solution you know of, Martin already knows it, or he'll figure it out in the next 24 hours for you. So
awesome. Well, that's always good. So how about you, Charlie? Any favorite kind of tools? I know you have a bunch.
I don't even know how to pick. I'd rather hear some questions from the audience. I mean, you don't,
Okay.
I'll reach behind me and grab some. I mean, I think there's a lot of high tech stuff, but
Okay.
let's open it up for Q&A
Yeah.
for the folks that are
Okay.
still.
Well, if
Can,
anybody
can
has
I
any,
can I make
please.
one more comment
Yes, of
about
course.
Zoom real quick?
Yeah.
I'm making a personal plea to the entire hobby. Learn how to use your microphone, learn how to mute your microphone, and if you're managing a meeting, learn how to do both. It is absolutely important. Again, for the purposes, I want you to think about this for a second. For the purposes of preserving incredible research, it does no one any good to listen to someone take a phone call in the middle of a Zoom meeting. It's critical that we respect the audience, the presenter, and the knowledge that we're preserving when we record that session. And it is all blown out of the water when we just can't do something simple like muting our mics or having someone manage the chat so that they're muting the microphones for you. I don't want to be disrespectful, but I'm making a plea because that's the value of these presentations we're having, is that we're preserving knowledge. And the information that that person is presenting, especially if you're going to record it and put it on YouTube, isn't just there for the folks that are sitting in the room. It's there for everyone forever. And we want it to be valuable and we want them to value it. So please, just a quick reminder and a quick plug for the mute.
that sounds great. Stephen, I see you have your hand raised there. Did you want to share with us?
Several of you gentlemen know me in that about a year ago now, I moved from Alaska to Western Pennsylvania. And many things, being 4 hours away in Alaska, you just don't have the ability just to jump on a plane and go to a summer seminar, at APS headquarters, which were awesome. Couldn't do a lot of those things. We didn't have Zoom. So a lot of things that we wish we had. Okay. When I moved to Western Pennsylvania, I belonged to the Wilkinsburg Club. But it wasn't as robust as some other clubs. And I was able to make a couple of trips to APS in Belfont. That was awesome. Met Mr. English and many other great staff members that helped me get, let's say, back into the stamp business. And it's just been great. And someone shared the Lancaster County and said, man, you need to go to their site because they got great club. And I did that, and Charlie just took me on. Now my home calendar, every Wednesday night is blocked out. I mean, I have to go. My wife knows that I'm going to have dinner and then run downstairs to the laptop to watch the Lancaster County, Stamp Club, Philatelic Society have theirs. And then the other ones I normally will sometimes be able to watch the New York Club. But I guess what I was going to say is from the other side of the window, you gentlemen are way the heck up there for me. I look forward to listening to y'all's presentations. And you've got to know that people like me, we are somewhat thankful for COVID because when COVID hit, all of a sudden I was able to turn on golly every couple of days and watch Heidi present stamp chats. And I still love stamp chats. I think that's a great source. And then the summer seminars, I started being able to, go to Kathy Rochelle and do the C3. That's a great venue to learn these courses. And like I said, all the Zoom courses that Charlie and his gang present, it's just great for those of us that don't have that. And I know I asked Charlie several times, when you go back to your local meetings, don't forget us guys out there that just don't have that fancy club, okay? Because right now I swear by Zoom. I mean, like I said, I've got to get my stamp chat in. I got to get my C3. I'm signed up for about 4 different summer seminar classes next month. I look forward to those kinds of things, and I hope that y'all just keep that in mind as y'all continue to make these websites just awesome. You know,
Thanks a lot.
really
That's
do
a lot of great
appreciate it.
feedback for everybody here. And one
It
thing,
was excellent. That was an excellent advertisement for the American
Yeah.
Philatelic Society, Stephen. Thank you very
No
much for
doubt.
that.
Yeah, I hope
couldn't
you're.
have
I
said
hope
it-
you're
any
recording
of it
this.
better myself.
I hope you're recording this, Steve,
absolutely.
because
I'll
gonna want a
send Scott a
snippet.
snippet. Yeah, there.
Yep, he's going to want
That's
to
a test. That's a testimonial, my friend. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
And one thing just to add on top of that, you talked about the stamp chats, which are awesome, is please take a look. And I know the APS also sponsors the podcast that Charlie Epting does. And those guys are great, and they're cranking out a lot of really awesome material too, talking to some great people. And please look at those. Different age groups interact different ways. I know a lot of younger people are more into podcasts, but I've kind of learned I can learn a lot from those. And I'll be sitting working, and instead of listening to music, I'll listen to those guys talk. So please check those out also. Charlie, I know those guys put a lot of time into that. So anybody else want to share any other tips or tricks or tools or fancy technology they use?
Oh,
Sure, Bob.
oh, I'm sorry. I was going to ask a question.
Sure, that's fine too.
I guess it's depends upon the individual, but what is the ideal length of time for a Zoom presentation, the ideal number of slides in the PowerPoint, and the pace of the talking? In other words, you could have a 60-slide PowerPoint and ramble on for an hour, or even get it done in 10 minutes. So I know we'll get different answers, but anybody have any ideas on that?
I'll just add something really quickly on some of the things that we've done. I've found that 1 hour is a little tough because there's some people out there that maybe have an hour and 15 minutes. It seems like things trail off after about an hour and a half approximately, but somehow, sometimes an hour just isn't enough, for somebody who has a really nice slide deck with a nice presentation. So that's just been my experience between Pennsylvania Society and Mid-Atlantic, doing these roundtables and things is a little different because we're kind of more involved with what we're doing. We're not just listening to one person speak. But I have found about an hour and 15 minutes is a pretty good time, and then maybe 15 minutes for questions if you have something to shoot for. And hopefully it's an interesting topic too. But,
Well, Ron Ron, thank you for that. Ron gave 60 slides in 20 minutes, like a hummingbird flying around. That's rapid, Ron. That is rapid. But thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Scott. I know you wanted to say. I mean, I know
Bob,
how long I can talk for, but go ahead, Scott.
Bob, thank you for the question, because I'm doing I'm going to be the presenter for a talk on stamp chats during summer seminar online. And what I really want to focus on isn't necessarily what's it like to give a stamp chat for the APS, but what I do want to talk a little bit more broadly about, giving presentations. I'll tell you a quick anecdote if I can. When I was in college, I had a chemistry professor, who was a Pennsylvania Dutch and graduated from Gettysburg College, played football there, which is a D3 school. So, he had no talent. But when we would get essay questions, right, and we would ask, somebody in the class would always ask this question, and he would sit there and he'd stroke his beard 3 times, always 3 times. And on the 3rd shot, he would throw his finger up in the air and he would go, long enough to cover the subject and no more. What we have sometimes we have a tendency in the hobby to give a great presentation followed by a bunch of things that we own. And so my first piece of advice to anyone giving a presentation is the people watching you, and this is a trick I learned in public speaking. And as most of you know, I was in politics for 25 years before I did this. So I don't know if I was good at it. I was just never run off a stage. So at least I made that much. But the first thing I'm going to tell you is the audience is rooting for you the minute you start, because they want to sit there and they want to be engaged for as long as you need to speak. What I think we need to do in the hobby is consider efficiency sometimes when we don't. And that is, images are useful if they're proving a point or advancing a topic. If you want to show off your stuff, get a website, get an Instagram account, get a Facebook page, I don't care. But if you want an audience to sit through it, I think ideally, you really want to be able to segment that thing to 30 minutes with Q&A. That's what I call an ideal average. I know people are going to say longer is better, but 30 minutes with a Q&A is really where you want to be. After that, you're probably delivering 2 talks in one. And so and if you've got that much stuff, break it into a 2-part session. People will come back and watch the second part. I promise you that. Most of you came back and watched us again after you listened to us for 2 hours the first time, because hopefully we're going to give you something that's useful. But I always say this, in public speaking, there's 5 minutes and then there's 5 minutes. They're the same amount of time. One of them just seems a lot longer than the other one. So take advantage of the audience. You don't ever want to lose them. So if you feel like you've got more information than you can cover in one talk, make it a 2-parter. But always make sure that you're providing just enough information to inform them of the points you're trying to make and no more. That's a lot, but there you go.
Using one of the old adages, leave them wanting more. If you talk so much that they don't want to hear you talk anymore, you've hurt everything. You've hurt them, you've hurt yourself, you've hurt the organization that invited you. Generally speaking, I follow Scott's rule. I look to talk about a topic I can cover in 30 minutes, and then I talk at a conversational rate, the pace of the talk, so that I may end up at about 38 minutes when everything is said and done. Then you get a Q&A, especially if the topic's an hour long. That's about right, because you'll get a few quick conversational questions, and then you'll get 3 people that hang on for 15 minutes over. And that's fine, but you need to be able to cover your topic conversationally, completely in 30 to 38 minutes.
That sounds good. And Fran put on there, had a great comment, because this was my number 2 thing after the digital microscope was an OttLite. There's sometimes you catch sales on them at different places and they're very reasonably priced. It does make a world of difference. It's really awesome. All their products are very, very good. If you guys have, my wife's a quilter, so that's where I found out about them. They use them too. So that's very good products.
And I'll say one more thing about presentations, particularly with slide presentations that you're doing. Save the good information for your stories. And by that, I mean, sometimes my dear friend Mick Zase once did a presentation at the South Carolina Department of Education. It was, he wouldn't let me see it in advance, and he promised me it was going to be a thrilling adventure ride through education policy. And Bob, I will tell you this, and if Mick were here, he'd acknowledge that I did this, but he literally wrote 70 pages of text and read every word that was on those slides. That is often a thing. You want the slide presentation is your teaser for the fascinating work that you've done, for the research that you've done. You want to make sure that they have the point they need to take away on the slide, but you've got some fun stories and you can't read them. You can tell them. And people will pay attention to both. I promise you that. And so that's the other thing is, please don't put a presentation together where all the text that you're providing, all the conversation you're providing is really the text that's on the slides.
So I did a presentation out in Chicago at a stamp show. And my wife said, once you went off text and did it, wing it from the slides because you know the material, you were much better. But if you followed the text, you were too nervous looking. So I discovered that at maybe the 3rd slide, and I just went off text and just kept on going and got the point across anyways.
Awesome. And it's really important to practice those things too. Trying to, like when you say Martin saying 30 minutes or 38 minutes, who's going to pick a number that says 38? Well, Martin is, because he's very precise, right? He knows exactly what it's going to be. Other people will say, 40, 45, whatever, they're picking a number. But if you practice this enough, it's going to work the way you practiced it. And that's going to pay off for people. That's for sure.
I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
when I see the talks on YouTube, say you have a meeting on Wednesday and I look and I miss the meeting and I look at the talk on a Thursday or a Friday, I'm not in a hurry. I take my time. So if it's a 30-minute meeting or a talk, or if it's an hour talk, it's not a problem. And the other thing is I have the opportunity of going back and re-listening to what the individual says on something. So there's a part of these talks that says, keep it simple, stupid. And there's another part that says, fill it up with facts and, let the audience sort it out later.
I'm sure there's a lot to that too. I'll tell you, that's why I like this roundtable concept. I'll tell you, the first one we did on this, I sat down the next day and I downloaded the video and that kind of stuff. I took like 5 pages of notes because everybody had little tidbits, little nuggets, that I wrote down.
True.
Probably nobody else got that many notes out of it, but I was pretty much capturing everything that I could. So someday it's going to, those little things are going to pay off.
Well, and the good thing to add is that we supplement it with the actual presentation because, we always get the presentation beforehand. We've always asked for it. We have it. We get it. We can help run it as well if we need to, or the speaker can, and then we post. I post that as well. So you've got the video to complement the presentation. And some presentations have supplemental slides at the end, which they didn't get to talk to, which sometimes adds a little bit more data and a little bit more of that backstory too. So I think I like what Martin and Scott said again about finding that balance and, no more than 45 if you take out any cues, because you might have that 15 or 18 minutes of Q&A. And it gives you that full kind of 60-minute or so, give or take, to get it across. But if you have a beginning and you introduce a little synopsis of the journey you're going to take folks on, and then you go through the body and you wrap it up by bringing them back to the beginning, that you want to leave them with these 3 or 4 points, and you can close that story, folks are going to remember that story, and then they're going to hope you come back with a part 2. Even if you didn't even tell them there's a part 2, they may even just want to see you when you speak again because you kind of had them entertained. And I think that cadence is really important when you're going through the material, not to go through it too quickly, nor too slowly, nor get hung up on it. And I like what Tom said too. You got to be just comfortable when it comes to a little practice. If you're having a conversation, your material. You don't have to read every single bullet, right? But that's there if you have to go back to it. But just talk about the information and then move on and keep that story going. You'll be much more engaged at the end of the day. And I think it just comes with practice. It just does. And I've been fortunate to have you folks listen to me for like 82 minutes. So and look who I'm sitting with, Scott and Martin, the front
Awesome.
Man and the drummer. I think I'm like the keyboardist off on the side with the curtain closing in front of me. So I always appreciate the opportunity to speak to this group and anybody else that'll listen. So, Steve, thank you. And Martin, Scott, go ahead, Scott.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump on you, Charlie.
No,
Thank you for the
good.
kind words. You're very kind. But Bob, you raise an interesting point, and that is, who's your audience? Is your audience there and in real time, and how are you managing them? And are you watching it back, and how are you managing that? One of the things that we talk about when we do stamp chats, for instance, is that while it's important to feel connected to the audience that's there in real time, don't make it such a big deal that the people who are watching feel completely out of place. So you are very careful about the way that you acknowledge people who are there live. If it's an engaged Q&A, for instance, like this is, it's okay to say, hey, Bob, it's good to see you, and talk to you a little bit, because your question you're asking is going to get popped up on the screen and all of that. But if you're doing just a presenter and a host, then you don't necessarily want to play to the live audience. But the one critical thing you've got to remember is, if the questions that come at the end of that presentation help feed the presentation, then you've got to give people time to do it. There's a degree of awkwardness that comes when you say, okay, we're going to do an hour on this. And then the speaker goes for 55 minutes and it's like, okay, I get one question. And then no one wants to ask it because they're afraid to be the guy who slows everything down, because now we're all ready to leave. So you've got to balance those audiences. And that's why you've got to think both ways about how you're managing that. So how's it going to get presented when you do the video presentation? Are you going to cut the Q&A session off at the end? And if the answer is yes, well, then people can ask questions for as long as they want. So it's really just a matter of what you're setting out to do. So have a little bit of a definition before you start about what you want to do. But I really do think that with live presentations, and even for those that you're doing on video, not everybody's got the same amount of time. If I look at the metrics of our YouTube page, I can tell you that 40 minutes and less do much better than 40 minutes or 41 minutes and more. And I can also tell you that applied philately, that is things that teach you something, obviously teach you something with the title of the if I taught you how to handle the postal covers of 1866 and there was good practical advice in there, more people would watch that than if I just said the fascinating covers of Lancaster County from 1866 or whatever. So my point is that you've got to think a little bit about what you want your live audience to go through and what you want your recorded audience to go through.
It's a great point. Thanks for picking on Lancaster County. That's good. I appreciate that.
Lancaster is setting the
Some of the best presentations I've seen outside of the APS.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank
So,
you.
and speaking of that, just I'll throw out one more tip for a software thing. I try to help Charlie with his presentations. I use Camtasia. It's pretty good. It can be a little bit complicated to use. I found another one that's it's actually, I think, free. It's Lightworks, and it's very similar, and the learning curve is much less. But you can edit those videos, the ends of them, and you can take out. I've sat one time. It took me 8 hours to edit a 1 hour video, taking out the ums and ahs and all that stuff. You can do that with Camtasia. But anyway, Lightworks and Camtasia, they're worth looking at if you really want to make a nice presentation. So I break it down into a bunch of different ones too.
Thank you again, Steve, and everybody. I really enjoyed this. This
everybody
was a
for
great
being here.
double session, and I really appreciate everybody sticking it through. And to Martin and Scott, I'm going to get to your level. Just give me another couple decades. I'm working on it. You guys are
Please,
great.
Dr. DiComo.
I appreciate
I'm in your
it.
shadow, Charlie. I am in your shadow.
I appreciate it. You guys are it's phenomenal. And again, Steve Kennedy for just driving these and getting everybody around the table and open discussion dialogue. I always learn something and really appreciate you driving this. And I look forward to the future meetings as well. Just thank you, Steve. Just great.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it, and we'll see you at our next roundtable.
Good to see everyone. Have a good
Great
evening.
night.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
All right.